Good morning. My name is Marcia Stromgren with Just the Facts. And today I have in the studio Cody Barringer, who is running for House District 7 in the Duluth area. Welcome, Cody.
Thank you.
Nice to have you here this morning. Please tell me a little bit about yourself, your family, and then why is it that you decided to run for this office?
Sure. My name is Cody Barringer. I'm a flight instructor. I work at Lake Superior College. And I have a son. He's 4 years old. And he's the main reason that I decided to run for office. Simply put, I was concerned about the direction that the state is going. I was concerned about the direction that the country is going. And I enjoyed amazing freedoms growing up. And to this day, the freedoms that I have that allow me to pursue my dreams and achieve all kinds of great things, I think are very special in our country. And I really want him to be able to have those same freedoms. And I think that we're on a dangerous path, and our state faces a lot of issues if we continue down that path. That's why I decided to run for District 7B.
Okay, describe some of these issues that you feel are rather dangerous for yourself and your family.
Sure. Two of the most important issues that I'd like to talk about, and I hear as I'm out knocking on doors that people are most concerned about, are the economy and our education. And as he nears the age where next year he'll be entering the schooling system, I'm concerned about the amount of control that the government exercises over schools, and also that the unions exercise over schools. And one of the things that I like to make clear to people is that teachers' unions represent teachers' unions' interests, whereas teachers, parents, and the children are the ones that I think should have the say. And so I'm a strong proponent of more local control of education. And I think that we've had some success with charter schools, and that can continue to grow and be a good thing. Another example, and my opponents in these races have oftentimes said, we want to give more money to education. And I want education to be properly funded, don't get me wrong. But if my boss came to me and he said, you know what, Cody, you're not doing a very good job, so I'm going to give you more money so that you start doing a good job, I would be delighted. And what would my reaction be? Of course, I'd probably do an even worse job yet and see if I can get more money still. So just for political purposes, saying we're going to give more money to education doesn't solve the problems.
Well, most of my viewers know I monitored the 709 school district since 2008, when my taxes for my business just skyrocketed. For the red plan, believe me, it certainly is still the red plan. They're still taking more money. And what are the results that we have? We have a major disparity between the people of color and the white people. We have a major disparity between the western section of the city and the eastern section of the city. And I went to Denfeld. We all graduated, for the most part. Maybe there were a few that did not, but we never went without textbooks, desks to sit in, and sat in overcrowded classrooms. Never. Now, Denfeld is twice the size it used to be, and those were some of the things they experienced at the beginning when they closed Central and put all these kids together. So what have we seen? We have seen increasing bullying. We have seen increasing test scores dropping. And we have seen some programs that even teachers are having a hard time teaching simply because of this Common Core business, which was mandated from the federal government. And I don't disagree with you at all. I think the federal government needs to get out of the education business and get it back to local control. And that's when there will be success in the classrooms. So what have you been learning about, okay, the potential of where your child's going to go? Are you going to be one of those parents that has looked into crossing over into Proctor or Hermantown to put your kid in a school that's actually succeeding? Or What do you think you can do for your son so you don't experience the same thing hundreds of other people are experiencing?
You know, I'm looking into all my options, and when I say that I'm concerned about my son and I'm concerned about the direction that the schools are going, I take that very seriously. So much so that I am actually looking at making the effort to homeschool him myself. And I think that the best way that, the best education he's going to get is that kind of education. So that's one of my goals, is to be able to try, and it's a high calling, and I think it's challenging, but I've seen a lot of good support out there. There's a lot of homeschooling groups, conventions, seminars, and materials growing. So I think that's the first and foremost option on the table for me right now.
Well, I can't tell you how excited I am to hear you that. I hear you say that. I was a veteran homeschooler in the state of Minnesota. We had no law to protect us when I started it. My daughter is 36 right now, and she was a baby when I started. So that's how many years ago I got into that fight. And I pulled my kids 1 year of public education for our oldest, disaster, and then the other one never went to public education at all, and Naomi never went to public education. And yes, it is the best option. It is a struggle. There's a lot of work to be done, but anybody that can read and write and understand textbooks, and you have so much more at your disposal today with the internet and the whole business than we had when we started, that there's really no way to fail unless you just aren't doing your job. So I'm excited to hear you say that that's an option for your family. That's great, because you will keep them away from the bullying problems, the transgender problems. I mean, this is something that is really gotten way out of hand, and all of the other interference into your child's whole lifestyle, which is going on through the public education today. They've got lots of time for social engineering, but when you get children that go from Laura MacArthur School to the middle school, the Taj Mahal, that $48 million worth of everything, and they can't read and write at 11th grade level at Denfeld, there is very definitely something wrong with the system. So I'm glad to hear that that's one of your issues. What are some of the other ones that you have decided that are key for running for this office?
Well, I think another of the biggest issue that allows us to enjoy the freedom that we enjoy, and as I said at the beginning, to pursue our dreams, is our economy and our prosperity. And it's really interesting in these races, all the way up to the CD8 race, to hear politicians, and I don't really consider myself a politician, to hear them talk about how they want to promote our economy and they want to promote mining, but yet their actions oftentimes betray that. And my opponent specifically likes to talk a lot about wages, and we know that it's one of the Democratic platform ideas is to try and raise minimum wage. A lot of studies have been done, and if you're a free thinker, you probably came to this conclusion already before the studies came out, that there are very, very harmful implications to our economy of trying to mandate on a scale like they want to mandate the wages that they want. But I don't think that they seem to care too much about those results and are willing to go forward with that kind of thing anyways. But that's just one example. The wages, the mining is under attack, coal is under attack. A lot of these things that I stand on relate and tie into my personal story. For example, when I wanted to learn how to become a professional pilot, I was able to get a job in the oil field, and I was able to fund my studies, and I was able to become a professional pilot without taking out a penny of debt. Why? Because there was an economic boom. There were jobs. I lived in North Dakota for a time, whereas I was able to keep a lot of my money, and I was able to use it to take care of my family and pursue my studies. So that's the kind of thing that a strong, healthy economy gives. If you want to talk about a job with living wages, there were great wages there. And I think that the policies that I stand on for not allowing the government to be overbearing with businesses allows that kind of thing to happen. not just the business regulations, but also the environmental regulations are often used not for the sake of protecting the environment, but to push political agendas. And I think that is a serious danger, particularly in our area, because Duluth, while we don't have the mines maybe in my district, it's our lifeblood, these industries. And they're under attack. The idea has been pushed by the present administration that things like coal and oil are somehow inherently evil. So in the name of environmental activism, political agendas have been pushed that are very, very harmful. And so it's frustrating to me to see candidates saying that they support mining, but betraying it with their actions.
Well, you mentioned business. An interviewee the other day and I talked about this. As a business owner, I own a storage facility. If I don't stay competitive with the other facilities, I'm not going to be full all the time like I am. So regulations and increasing taxes has been my biggest complaint. The taxes have gone sky high. From 2007 when we bought the business in the fall of the year to the following year, the taxes went up 339% in 1 year. So instead of paying $13,000, which we wondered if we could manage that half of the year of $6,000+, it went to $21,000 the following year. So we paid a penalty a couple of times, but then because we were diligent with our loan payments, the bank gives us a emergency loan. So here we are paying interest to pay our taxes, or we're paying penalties to pay our taxes, and that just seems to be a rather very poor approach to try and to keep businesses going in the state of Minnesota. And I've talked to people that have more than one business, and they say they have businesses in other states. This is the worst state where they have businesses in comparison to these other states. It is the worst in taxes and regulations.
And I think we're at a tipping point, or nearing a tipping point, where we actually have some good things going for our state. We've got an IT boom going on in the Twin Cities, which is working really well. But yet, when the Tax Foundation came out with their report, they placed Minnesota at 46th in the nation for business-friendly or unfriendly tax climates. So while we do have some good businesses, they are gonna be forced to leave our state if we're not careful. If we remain in 46th place, the prosperity that we enjoy now is going to be short-lived as more and more of those businesses flee to neighboring states. Some of our neighbors, like South Dakota, have some of the best tax climates around. So it's unsustainable to maintain some of the policies that were implemented under what was a Democrat-controlled House, a Democrat-controlled Senate, and Democratic governor in the Minnesota legislature for a number of years.
Well, another thing about business, when you have so much control over them, people get rather tired of trying to meet those controls, and then they pile some more on. So then government gets bigger, and there's less money to do what absolutely has to be done. And I've seen this over and over again, is there is only so much of a pie. And you collect all these taxes, it's only going to go so far. But if you keep adding on, like rail from the Twin Cities to Duluth, and trails throughout the state, and all these amenities that are not absolutely crucial, you're growing big government, you're growing control over the taxpayer, and you're causing more of a problem than you're actually solving. What is your thoughts?
I can't agree with you more. And in many of the forums and the debates that we've had, questions have been posed about what to do with the government surplus. And my basic philosophy is that we should try to avoid taking people's money by force unless it is something necessary and an essential function of the government. So if we have a government surplus, that doesn't mean that that's money that our government has earned to just go spend on fun projects or maybe a weekend at the golf course. If we have a government surplus, that is money that we have taken from our citizens, whether they wanted to pay it or not. The taxes aren't optional. So when we take money by force from citizens, I think we have to have a great deal of accountability there. And I think we need to ask ourselves, for every project, we need to ask ourselves, is this a need? Is this an essential function of government? Or is this a pet project? And there are a lot of things that have been pushed through. And there again, when you have one-party control, you can get a lot done, but what you get done is not always for the best. So this idea that we have a surplus, governments aren't businesses. And if we have a surplus, that means we took more money than we had to have. And that, what should we do with that money? Well, we should give it back to the people we took it from in the first place.
Which, my question on that is, how much is it going to cost to give it back? How many people are going to be paid as they sit there and filter through all this and give it back to the folks, which it comes up to a few dollars. So to me, the whole scheme is totally convoluted, and there is supposed to be a guideline as to what really government is all about. It's for health and safety, roads, transportation, for the benefit of all, not a handful. And what I see with this light rail, it's going to be stopping at the casino in Hinckley. Well, they're a big player in this, aren't they? How much is that going to benefit them that they're stopping at the casino for people to get off or get on, before they go home? So the players that are involved in this whole light rail thing, my son lives in the cities. The light rail goes fairly close to where he lives, and it's never full. And it never was full in Maryland when I was out there many years ago, 2000, and it was never full in St. Louis when I was there in 1999. So cannot we use the results of other cities that are even bigger than we are and determine how important is this light rail issue?
Yeah, and I think I'm every bit as frustrated with you and with the people that are watching this, whether it be on TV or on the internet, that anytime we see politicians looking out for cronyism or special interests, and not looking out for the interests of the people that they're meant to represent, it gets really frustrating. And that's one of the main reasons that I stepped up and said I want to run for this office, in order to bring some sincerity and a good work ethic to the position, and to not allow those kinds of games to be played.
Well, when you're elected, I'm going to look forward to seeing some changes, because that's a very, it's not just a reasonable goal, noble goal for sure, and certainly others have had that same idea in mind, and it's convincing the voters out there that they need to rethink who they're voting for, who they're pulling that lever for. Maybe they're just straight union people, but what has the union done to their pocketbook in pulling the lever year after year for the same type of government? Certainly it has affected them, just like it has affected all of us, with higher costs in housing, higher cost in taxes for your home, higher costs for other types of needs that you have to now go without, especially some of these people on lower income, because we have grown big government so big that it's gotten out of hand in the financial area.
Yeah, and as I said at the beginning, the reason that I'm running is because I want our state to move in the right direction, and I want it to be a better place for this and the next generation. So my campaign, I'm completely funded by donations from local people who care about this district. I haven't received any money, nor am I beholden to any special interest groups, and I want to keep it that way.
I think that too is a noble goal in what you're doing. So some of the other issues that we're facing here in the state of Minnesota, as you've looked at this, we can't look at your opponent simply because she's running new just like you are. But in your forums that you've been with her, can you give us some kind of an idea how you are different than she is?
Yeah, I think the difference is crystal clear, and it has to do with our philosophy. Ultimately, the question is one of whether you believe that more government involvement in our personal lives and more government programs is a good thing. It also has to do with whether you believe that government gives us rights and whether government defines what those rights are and what those rights are and the role that government plays in that process. So my opponent has made it very clear that she has a willingness to try and ultimately legislate happiness. And we want a good society. She has children, I have children. We want a healthy, thriving society. We want good wages. But the methods that she would use or I would use to try and get there are radically different. And it is my belief, well, let me take what the Founding Fathers said. Our rights come from nature, and nature's God. It's not the government's position to take away our rights or to give us rights. If anything, the government's job is to be restrained from taking our rights away from us. So we don't get our power from our government. We give the government its power. We don't get our rights from the government. Our Creator gives us our rights. So I think that makes it very clear what the differences are between my opponent and myself. And so ultimately what I'm running my campaign on in my stump speech is essentially freedom. Freedom for the people and how that translates into, like I said about education. Freedom means the parents and the children and the teachers get a say in education rather than the unions and the government. Freedom in the economy means that we have a level playing field and we have fair policies and fair regulations. And it's no secret, even though the Democrats will deny it, it's no secret that regulations are used as a tool. And there have been recordings and there has been evidence. We've caught people red-handed using burdensome regulations to snuff out small businesses, whereas the larger businesses who already have lawyers and people whose job it is to comply with those regulations, they can handle the regulations. But the mom and pop shops can't. So I think that if we can restrain the government from taking away those freedoms, we'll have a healthier economy.
I think a lot of that, Cody, goes back to the educational system. I'll go back to my 9th grade civics class. So that's a few years ago because I graduated about 50 years ago now. This guy made us read this textbook the whole time. There was really very little interaction or discussion on what did that text mean. And I don't remember, of course, back then, but down the road a piece, I got a traffic ticket. My kids were being home educated. They went into the courtroom with me. I wanted them to see what it would be like when they violate the law. And so they had to sit there, and I got my turn, and the judge made me do X number of hours of restitution because I really couldn't pay for the fine. So my kids saw that there was a consequence for speeding. I don't know how they applied that when they got older. My daughter's got a very heavy foot, like her mother. But that to me is what a civics class should be doing. When I was a child younger than that, we had teachers that took us to different places. They were called field trips. And we didn't just sit in the classroom and learn. We learned things from experiences that we went on. So to me, those were creative teachers that had the right to do that. Now the teachers are told what you need to do and what you can do, what you can't do, and so they don't have much freedom. But even back then, my civics teacher was really a big bore. And we did not learn a lot from that civics class because he was not engaging all of the different avenues that he could have used. Unlike me, when I was home educating, we went on more than one kind of field trip, so they got an experience as to what it would be like if you were put in this kind of a situation. So education today is indoctrination. It is not education, and I'm not afraid to say that and stand my ground on that because I've watched it happening over the last 8 years of watching the school district.
And here again, I draw on my experience, and I was fortunate enough to spend most of my school years at a school with very small classes, very close to the teachers. And to this day, I can remember details so well. And one specific one, since we're talking about it, is I had a social studies teacher, and I think this was in the 7th grade, that explained to us what a democracy was, and used the term mobocracy. And so I thought about that for a bit, and I thought, well, to this day, in the debates and the news, we hear the term democracy all the time. And no, I could never say it better than Benjamin Franklin said it. Benjamin Franklin said, a democracy is 2 wolves and 1 sheep voting on what to have for dinner.
Yeah, that's a good example.
And so I think that's important. In our civics classes, are the students learning that this is a constitutional republic, where a pure democracy, every person would vote on every issue, and a simple majority would have an absolute tyranny to rule over every other thing. But the reason our founding fathers created our government the way that they did was to have representatives and checks and balances. And there's not much I can do about everything that's happening at the federal level, but I think a lot of those checks and balances are under attack.
I agree. Another way to remember a democracy versus a republic, which is what, if you say the Pledge of Allegiance, a democracy is a rule by few. A republic is representations by all who want to participate in it. Now, it's real interesting. In the last presidential election, I've recently read there's over 2 million people that did not even vote. Our choices were so dismal that they just stayed home. And Christian radio the other day said it's our duty to be informed and get out there and vote if we want to keep our freedom. And so, you know, that's the other thing. Young people today and the next generation up, they listen to the television ads, they read the mail, if they can, that comes into their home, and they vote by the one they're most familiar with, their name, and then they believe a lot of the lies that are told about the opponent. I must get a piece of mail from one candidate every single day, always bashing his opponent. Now, the opponent doesn't have a record, but the one that is running against him has a very dismal record. And so let's look at his dismal record of taking away the rights of the people by growing the government larger and larger. So
the education, as the civics education, is so critical. And our founding fathers made it clear. If we are not a well-educated and a virtuous people, we won't be able to sustain the freedoms that we have. We've been the most successful country, and we still are a great country and a successful country. And the way we hold on to that is by making sure that we're well-educated and that we're virtuous people.
that's a tall order in this day and age, don't you think?
It is. I think it's a very tall order. And so it starts not in school, it starts at home. And so what I want to do in my home is I want to teach my son about how our country works, why we have the freedoms that we have, give him a good education, and allow him to read, to assimilate information, to use critical thinking, to challenge ideas. And of course, above all else, as a good parent, to instill good morals and virtue in him. So the fabric of our homes is what shapes our societies, and as a result, our society shapes our government. So we could do a lot of pointing fingers at politicians and what happens in our government, but ultimately, a lot of what goes on in our government is a symptom of what's happening in our society.
Oh, and I couldn't agree with you more. There is a lot of families that really don't know up from down, and they've had very poor examples set before them. So they're just following in the footsteps of their parents and parents back from that. So that's another very sad situation for the children that have to go into these classrooms to be dealing with these children that just get out of hand because they've not been taught proper manners and they've not been shown proper ways to act. And so then there's more detrimental effects to your children in regards to that. So, okay, what are some of the issues that happened last year that you can tell the viewers a little bit more about? We're talking about the the budget that didn't get passed because they were squabbling over one or two words, which is not even factual, according to one interviewee I did last week. It's all about the light rail. And they used the squabbling over a few misplaced or misspelled words as an excuse not to do anything. So what are your thoughts on the way things were handled last year?
Well, it would have been interesting to be a fly on the wall for some of those discussions, huh? Especially the ones that went on later having to do with calling a special session. But I think Representative Simonson, who's vacating the seat that I'm running for, said that it was one of the low points of his career in the House of Representatives that night when he had to walk out and basically throw his hands up and say, wow, we haven't been able to get our job done. So,
wasn't it his caucus that caused the monkey wrench in the first place?
So what happened there at the last minute, I don't know all the details, but I certainly suspect that there was a lot of partisanship going on. And I've heard one of the Democrats running for office here say that what's best for the people is for the Democrats to take back control of the House, because then they'll be able to get more done. But I think that's a little disappointing to hear as a citizen myself, because that reflects the idea that the people didn't know what was best for them, because it was the people that chose to give the Republicans the majority in the House and to take it away from the Democrats. And so I think the vote of the people should be respected. And I think that if the Democrats are having a hard time compromising because they're used to not have to, it's time that they need a change. Just like I said earlier, if I did a poor job and my boss came to me and said, I'm going to reward you by giving you more money so that you do better, that wouldn't work. I think what we need to have is more accountability instead of less. And instead of rewarding them for passing some bills and running up our expenses and expanding the reach of government, we need to hold them accountable for it. And I wish I could say more to the specifics of what happened with the light rail, but I agree with what you said. Games were being played. The media was talking about it being wording when I think it really had nothing to do with that. I've heard opinions from both sides, but it's very clear that was just a ploy to distract the attention.
An excuse for not doing their job, which is always easier to throw the ball back in somebody else's court when you don't want to be responsible. I guess people can go on the web and watch it. They just have to go into Minnesota State Government and find it. It's on there. The last time of the session, it's on there, so you can actually view the proceedings. So, I mean, how can you debate what happened once you see it? Nobody talks about going there and getting the facts. So, okay, one of the issues that's on the ballot is, do we allow a constitutional amendment to be, for a pay raise for our legislators, to be placed in the hands of a private group of people chosen by the governor and the head of the Supreme Court, I believe, was the other one. What is your thoughts on that issue? You know,
I'm having a hard time with that. Actually, I got my ballot. I requested an early voting ballot, and I have it sitting at home right now, and I'm waiting to check all the spots on there. And that's one that I'm really not sure what the best option is, because part of me says that the wage that legislators have been earning has stayed the same for quite some time. That's one of the arguments. And I do believe that wages should be somewhat competitive, enough to at least compel people with skills and good work ethics to be involved in the process. Now, it really is a service that we do. There's a reason it's called public service. So it's not something to get rich off of, but I think it would be good to have a competitive wage that can at least allow us to take care of of our families and some degree of modest comfort. So I'm questioning how long the level is going to stay the same as it has been for a while now. But at the same time, if we give it to a group, an unelected group, then we give away control and accountability for that process. So, like I said, I haven't checked that box yet, and I'm still weighing the sides and trying to come to a conclusion.
Well, I'd like to give you my opinion, having run for office in more than one situation, been in politics for eons. My daughter was, I think, maybe 11 or 14 when I started doing caucuses, and she had to go with me because she was home educated, so she got firsthand knowledge of everything that way. When a governor is in power, who has selected a judge, perhaps because one retired or died in office, they have sole power over an unconstitutional amendment that was changed, where with elected officials, we can get rid of them, sometimes in Minnesota, when they are padding their own featherbed. But what do you do with unelected officials chosen by the governor and then the head of the Supreme Court, I believe, like I said? What do you do with them? Once they're in power, who are they pandering to? The House or the Senate and the office of the governor, who's a straight one party in this Minnesota, which happens more often than not? Or do we leave it in the hands of the public, who has to elect these people, and when they see their performance, they can get rid of them in the next election? That's my thoughts on it, and it's up to you whether you agree or disagree, but that's what I've come to. And I had to ask a few people because I was in a quandary as well, but I really had my mind fairly made up before I asked them. I just wanted their thoughts on it, and this is what they shared with me.
Well, if there's anything a lot of people can agree on, I think it's the idea that we want transparency and accountability from our elected officials. It seems like oftentimes we just don't get enough of those two things.
And this is one of the reasons I joined the Legislative Evaluation Assembly, and I shared that stuff with you some time ago. Unfortunately, there's nothing from this last year yet. But there are certain people that were honorees year after year after year because they voted constitutionally, which is what the LEA stands for. And so growing big government is not what they stand for. They are very sincere about their idea that if a vote goes against the taxpayers and increases power and taxes, then it's not constitutional. And so just being a member of the Legislative Evaluation Assembly of Minnesota, you become an informed citizen of what happened in that legislative year, and then keeping tabs on opponents who have been in office for a while. You can see whether their actions were dismal or commemorative. And for the most part, there's rarely a Democrat in this group of people.
Yeah, well, thank you for giving me those too. I enjoyed reading and getting that viewpoint and having some of that research done. I think that tackles one of the challenges we have, which is staying informed in a busy job and a busy life. It's not always easy to keep track of where everybody is voting. But the votes are a good definitive way that we can judge where somebody stands. And so having groups like that that compile information and show us where specific people voted on specific bills is a great service, I think.
Well, and we don't get it straight from the media. we get what the controlled media wants to feed us, and it's usually based on their own political agenda. And I've seen this more often than not in our Duluth News Tribune. And of course, the state papers, can't even think of the name, St. Paul Pioneer Press and the other one. So an alternative media is the only way to get a different view. You can agree or disagree with it, but at least you'll see somebody else's take on it, so you can make a very more informed decision to decide on what you believe and how you should vote. So
I agree. It would be silly to trust one unverified source to do our research and come to our conclusions. And I think that's a lot of times what happens with the media, where people are not challenging what they hear enough and aren't looking for references and sources and facts often enough, because facts are important things.
well, and when you indoctrinate children very young, I mean, I go back to my school days and I think about the teachers I had. And, you know, I lived in a house where what they said when I was home was law, and what the teacher said when I was in school was law. And you didn't think critically. And they didn't teach the critical thinking skills either when I was in school. I know they didn't. So you come out of the public educational system, you've been indoctrinated in the ways of a particular mindset. And before you get too far along in your life, if you've taken the time to do some alternative resourcing, you really don't even think about what you're doing. You just do it because it's a habit. And so that's why I think the socialism and the indoctrination that is going into the kids all the time. I mean, I saw this many years ago with our oldest son, who's now 40. I think he's 48. I should know that. But anyway, yeah, he was lockstepping to what he was being taught. And I saw the danger in that, and I decided I wanted out. And homeschooling at that time was so foreign, and we had to be quiet and keep under the radar so that we weren't hauled into the police department, because there was no law to protect us at that time. So,
well, we're always moving in a direction. There's always change. Everybody talks about change. I want change. My opponent wants change. What kind of change?
yes.
And some of these things that you're talking about, I think the education system, under the control of a broader and broader level of government, all the way up to the federal government with Common Core, will invariably move us in a direction. And when I look at the situation and I assess that direction is not one that I think is best for our families and our country, what I would rather see happen is more local control over our education system, where the parents can get involved and influence the direction that the school goes. And where the schools go, there goes the society, and there goes the country's government as a result. So yeah, I think there's always small steps in one direction or another, and I want to be trying to prevent some of those steps in the wrong direction and help take some small steps in the right direction.
Well, growing the education budget, as you said earlier, is not working either. They've been throwing more money at it, and it still hasn't changed the problem, because the problem isn't that we don't have enough funding. The problem is we have too much bureaucracy and high wages for some people that are in education. I know that Duluth is one of the higher paid teachers' salaries in the state. Not bar none, but it's one of the higher ones. On the range used to be a lot more, because the mining paid for education on the range for many, many years. And I don't know what their part is in it anymore, but nonetheless, those teachers at one time were more well paid than they were here in Duluth, but now that is changing. And it's throwing more money at it, throwing more money, and trying a different program. This one didn't work. Oh, let's try another one. And that isn't working either. So,
And I'm a member of a union, and I have made no qualms, and I will make no qualms about saying how I feel about that. At one of our latest forums, I said, I'm a student. I'm working on my bachelor's degree. I'm an educator, and I'm a union member. And I'm proud of two of those three things. And I needed to get a job to provide for my family. And when I got a job, I didn't get asked if I believed in what the union believed in. I didn't get asked if I wanted to give money to this union. It wasn't optional. And I haven't yet gotten asked what concerns I have or what things I need worked on. So the union has not represented my needs at all. Matter of fact, the union has gone so far as to take money out of my paycheck and give it to and endorse my opponent in this race. So from even before the race, from day one, I've never felt like the union was looking out for my needs. I've always felt like the union was looking out for their own agendas and their own needs. And as an educator, this is probably a different union than what the public school teachers would have at the lower high school and grade school levels. But I think there's a common theme with unions saying that they're promoting what's best for the teachers and the employees and whatever the scenario may be. But the union really hasn't helped me at all. It's made my job more difficult on a daily basis, so by some of the standards that they set.
that's very interesting. And I imagine there's just absolutely no recourse either.
I think there's very little recourse. It's not optional. Of course, we don't have right-to-work laws that would allow us to opt out of the union membership. So
Okay.
if I want to go to work and make a living for my family, then I get to donate money to these causes that I don't, a lot of which I don't believe in.
I think that's happened in other states, but then there's been an uproar, and they've managed to change that. So that might be something in the future that needs to be, delved into. But I fully understand why many teachers do not come out and say anything against the union, and why they lockstep to what they're doing, because they have a fear of the potential of losing their job. That's not the America that we should be living under. That's more like socialism or totalitarianism by a select few of people. That's very disturbing to me.
Yeah, and well, maybe that's part of the reason that I'm so willing to come out and say how I feel about the union is I feel pretty comfortable with my job security, and so I'm not too concerned about struggling with that. When a person goes to work and they do a good job, I think the reward there is hopefully having some level of job security. And the unions do, similar to what the government often does in the marketplace, is they create artificial. The government creates an artificial market, artificial prices, artificial competition by getting involved, and unions get the same results. They will protect people who, they will say that they're protecting people who are working hard and protecting people who aren't working as hard, and it takes away the power of the business owners to be able to make decisions that are best for their own businesses.
Very interesting perspective on that. We just have a few more minutes left now, Cody. Are there some issues that we have not talked about that you'd like to touch on?
Well, I can think of one. It wasn't too long ago I was driving to a campaign event and I saw a few people along the side of the road, and I turned around quick because I saw that they were standing out in front of Planned Parenthood. And there was a small group that was out there protesting what Planned Parenthood does, and they informed me that it was Planned Parenthood's 100th anniversary. And we haven't been asked a lot of questions in our forums and through the news outlets and through the TV interviews about what our stances are on protecting the sanctity of life. And to this day, I don't know what my opponent's stance is on protecting the sanctity of life. But I want to make it perfectly clear that I believe life is sacred. And I believe we ought to be protecting life. And I stand opposed to what Planned Parenthood does. And I also stand opposed to the agendas of the ever-increasing creep of physician-assisted suicide. And this was brought up in a forum last night where some terms were used that honestly just disturbed me, as physicians referred to people as non-autonomous and talked about these non-autonomous people being essentially euthanized. And so this raises so many questions. First of all, I don't think we should be euthanizing anybody. But then who creates the definition and who controls what's autonomous and what isn't? So I want to make it perfectly clear where I stand on the sanctity of life, protecting life from the beginning to the end. That's an important issue for me.
Jim Tuttle and Pro-Life Action Ministries are the people you encountered on the street. I work with them and I know who they are. Mm-hmm. So they're very faithful, being out there all the time. And once Central High School closed, the Planned Parenthood didn't have easy access to a high school anymore because, there they are across the street from when the kids come down the hill, and now that school isn't there any longer. So, they had a great big audience to perpetrate their lies. And unfortunately, that's been shut down. So,
and I would encourage every person to do a little research on what Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood, believed. Mm-hmm. To make it perfectly clear what she stood for and what her desires were.
Her lifestyle.
What her lifestyle was.
Yeah.
And her end goals are very disturbing.
Yes.
And I would encourage people to go out and do some research and learn a little bit about the eugenics movement, to learn a little bit about the direction that she wanted to take Planned Parenthood. And it wouldn't be fair for me to try and summarize all of that, but she did interviews, she wrote articles, it's all out there. We can see what she believed, and it's really appalling stuff.
She believed in eugenics for the blacks, and they vote Democrat all the time. They have no clue what she really stood for, which is extremely sad. But that's what Margaret Sanger stood for. Blacks were non-human people, and the best thing to do is eliminate them. And there's more abortions in the black community than there is in the white community, which is extremely sad. We don't know, 58 million or more babies have been butchered since that passed. The Roe v. Wade passed back when my son, who's now 43, 1973, I believe that was the year when he was just born that year. That was when that was passed. And so people had the right to go get state money to have an abortion. That's another thing that's very disturbing. We're giving money to kill. Now, that's a lot of blood on the hands of the state government, which is extremely sad. So, yeah, if people knew, we'd hope that they would listen and change their views. Because, they're basically, when they vote for somebody that has voted for killing of an unborn child, they're virtually committing murder with that death of that child. It's very sad.
Yeah, I think it's a very important issue. One of the most important ones for me to be able to bring up is protecting life.
Well, I'm certainly glad to hear that because, it is a very, very important issue. Just in the last couple of minutes now that we have left, do you want to wrap up overall what would be some of your goals when elected to office? Where would you start?
Where would I start? Well, I'd have to learn my way around.
Yes, that's important.
So, I think as a freshman representative, there's a time to listen and to observe and to learn and to get up to speed with stuff. So, some of the committees that I would be interested in serving on are those having to do with the economy and the education. I want to protect the sanctity of life. I want to be able to protect and make sure that the government is staying out of people's ability to have free speech and religious liberties. So those are some of the things. It's not, the legislature is not a vacuum, so I certainly won't be taking a golden pen and signing anything into law. But I would start by building relationships with like-minded people and building relationships with everybody up on in the Capitol there, and trying to see what things we can agree on, and trying to implement some compromises, but compromises where the people win. So if you tell me that there's, well, I'll give you an example. If you said, let's compromise, instead of cutting off your arm, we'll just cut off your hand. That's not the kind of compromise I'm looking for.
No.
So the compromise that has to do with one party bickering over what they want with the other party in specific projects such as the light rail. I'm willing to compromise, but I want it to be a compromise where instead of being a less bad thing, it's something we actually, as a result of it, get something good for the people of Minnesota.
Something that's actually necessary.
Something that's necessary.
Yeah,
beneficial.
I've always wondered, okay, I'm going to the cities to see my children. The light rail does not drop me off by their house. I'd have to get a taxi to go to their house. And when I need to go back, I'd have to get a taxi to go get on the light rail. So am I saving any money? No. And I can't do any shopping and running around to different places down there without my car. So how does the light rail benefit me? I just don't go to one destination when I go down there. I'm sure that most people don't either. So yeah, the light rail, that's fine, I suppose, for some business people that go down and back again. But how many of us are working down in the Twin Cities that utilize a light rail, and it would make it expedient and efficient for them to do that? I don't hear of a lot of people that have jobs down there. Actually, lately I've been hearing more people moving up here. They want to get away from the big city and the crime. Yeah,
and there's nothing wrong with that.
No.
So I think, I've seen some of the numbers, and I don't think that it's economically a good idea. It's just the numbers don't pan out.
No.
So
economically unfeasible.
There you go.
Well, Cody, it's been a pleasure having you here this morning, and appreciate you coming in. And
Thank you.
Get this ready and going for you, and that's District 7.
7B.
7B.
Yep.
Vote November 8th, and that's coming up very shortly.
Yes, it is.
Thanks for tuning in. Have a great day. Bye now.